Hello, welcome to Vineyard KC West podcast. For more information, visit us at vineyardkcwest.com.
We moved to Kansas City, and I mean, do you guys always go to the Super Bowl? This is amazing. I mean, it's just, yeah, I'm just thinking like, because coming from San Diego and some of the, anyways, they even moved away from me. And so when I moved here, I said, I'm all in with the Chiefs. And my kids, that's hard. They're still holding on. So, well, I mean, it showed, like I poured in, like this is the team. And then, so now I leave them to their own choices. So, but isn't that exciting? You know, I mean, some of you guys are kind of like, I've heard enough. You know, it's all Chiefs. You know, everything, people are painting buildings red and all kinds of stuff. And I'm thinking about doing my, maybe painting my hair red next week, you know? Like if somebody comes with their whole body painted, you know, it's on. I mean, we'll find a prize for you guys or something. So, so next week, just to clarify, so what we do is it's just a different Sunday. Some people could care less, but so what we do is we try to mix that. We try to mix faith and what's going on that day because it's a part of our culture, whether you're a football fan or not. And so what we do is we actually have a video that's put together with NFL players and including Chiefs players. So they put together part of it, and then when they get to who the teams are, they actually put some of those players that that have that faith in Christ and in stories to share in their lives and whatnot with us and to encourage us. So. And we just make it kind of a party. I mean, we'll worship and do what we do, but then we have other stuff. So it's a fun day. So I encourage you guys to come next week and invite somebody too. We are going to dive into our series. We're in a series called People Skills, okay? And so we did the first week, we kind of set the context that we're in. And as far as communication and relationships are hard because there's barriers. There's great barriers to it. And then last week we looked at that we can actually get an upgrade to our communication, that we're not actually just stuck with how we communicated or how it's been passed down to us and our families, that Jesus actually gives us a new heart and a mind, which affects our communication and affects our relationships. And then today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the importance of our stories and other people's stories in our relationships and how they actually affect everything. And thinking about that, like my wife, Michelle, the first night that we actually talked for the first time was Christmas Eve, 1998. And so we were both on staff at a church, and we kind of said hi a little bit, but we ended up stuffing and restuffing bulletins, 2,500 bulletins for Christmas Eve because some words for songs were wrong in there. But we get started, we're doing that, and it's just she and I in this room. And so she says to me, she goes, "So what's your story?" Right? And so that's become kind of our term for all times. And so I put my best foot forward, right, and told her, and it worked, so not too bad. But she's been suffering the ripples of the consequences of the real story for 20 years, right? The layers of things like, oh, that's what you meant, and that's what the deeper level of that is, right? I mean, we have our story, but then there's our story that like really affects how we interact with people and relationships. And right, you've probably heard like in a conversation, there's who I think I am, there's who I think others people think I am, there's who I think, and then there's who you think I am. There's all these people involved. There's just not two people. So, I shared this story with her, and we all have stories or narratives that we're living out. And so, some are smaller and some are larger, but some people really kind of think of like a meta-narrative, okay? I think we actually all are a part of a meta-narrative, like the way we live out our lives and interact with people and make decisions and the way we view things and when things go wrong and things go right. It's a meta-narrative, like what story am I a part of? What movie am I a part of? What book am I a part of? There's some people that say that there's no meta-narratives, and what's interesting is the person that says that, they actually are a part of a meta-narrative, but they're like He-Man, master of the universe, and they've decided that there's no meta-narrative, and that's the meta-narrative, right? So as soon as you decide, hey, I've made the rule on everything, you now have created the greater thing that everybody has to abide by. So, stories are important because, there's consequences for stories. Like, I remember, 10 years ago or so, I got in a car accident. And it was just at this Costco. There was a 4-way stop inside going into the center. And I was here, and this gentleman was here, and he T-boned me. Okay, not very hard, but he, hit me on the side. He got out and he profusely said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I did that, and are you okay? And, hey, here's my insurance and all these things. So I'm like, cool, bummer, but we'll get it fixed. He's owning up, right? As soon as I talked to the insurance company, they say, well, he's saying you hit him. And I said, how in the world did I slide my car sideways? Because we took pictures and everything. So long story short, the insurance company said, well, we're going to have to count it up as 50-50. Like, how do you call 50-50? But it was because he had decided in his mind that this was the story of what happened. And he had decided that this was the truth somehow, and then other people lived it, and then there was consequences, small consequences, but they affected my life and cost and all those things, and anger and all sorts of stuff, right? But we're not talking about car accidents today. Really, we're talking about the big stories in our lives. And so the first thing that we need to look at when it comes to stories is the idea that we can live a better story, okay? Sometimes we kind of just get stuck in a story, and we just kind of walk on a certain way, and, well, this is just it. But if anything that you read, like when Jesus comes on the scene, is Jesus is this person that invites us into a better story, and that we can live in right. Author Donald Miller wrote a book, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. In a general sense, this is the point of the book, is that you can write a better story or live a better story. And he tells a story about a friend that his daughter's having issues and dating boys he doesn't want her to date, and the family's dysfunctional and having problems, and it's not working. Like, he's doing the best he can, and life just is just blah, right? And so what happens is he finds out about this group of kids in South America that unless they get an orphanage, like, they're going to be out on the street and have no food and no place to live, all this thing. So he goes to his family, and he says to him, he says, hey, I heard about this thing down here, and if somebody doesn't do this, this is what's going to happen to them, and this is what their lives are going to be like. And all of a sudden, the whole family says, well, what can we do? And so, we can sell everything and we can go do it. And so this family with teenagers, and the girl breaks up with the boy that she wasn't supposed to be with, and she's like, I'm done with you. And he's like, what? And she goes, I've got a better story, right? See, she wasn't doing all of this bad stuff because she just thought that's all she could have. It was just, she didn't have a better story. So this family wrote a better story and helped all these people in the moment. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. One person that wrote a better story or lived a better story in the Bible is Barnabas. And so Barnabas was, we learn about him in the New Testament. And here's a scenario that we walk through. What's happening here is the Apostle Paul, whose name was Saul before. I know it's confusing. The Bible does that. God changes people's names, and there's meaning to it and stuff. But Saul was a guy that persecuted Christians. He was a very religious guy. He was a rabbi, and learned under Gamaliel, one of the greatest rabbis, and he was a Pharisee, and just his lineage, everything was just pure. So when people started following Jesus, he just said he persecuted them. He stood by while they killed followers of Jesus, and he was just all out just to persecute the church. But then all of a sudden he had this moment where he met Jesus, and it changed him forever. So now instead of chasing after Christians and persecuting, he's telling everybody about the greatness of Jesus and convincing them. So it's in this context. He's preaching in Damascus, and then this happens in the midst of it. It says, after many days, this is Acts chapter 9, verse 23. After many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him. But Saul learned of their plan. Day and night they kept close watch on the city gates in order to kill him. But his followers took him by night and lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall. When he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was really a disciple. And so there's a lot more going on in this story, but what we're focused on is just relationships. Sometimes I think we read the Bible and we just put it into a religious category, but this is real life, right? You've got very real people that have a story of their own, and then they've got this guy, and they've got a story about him, and fear is overriding everything. They're closed off. They're closed off to relationship because of fear and what's happening. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord, and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. So look at the difference, right? He comes to Jerusalem, and the people that are supposed to be his friends, like, hey, I'm one of you now, are like, we want nothing to do with you, buddy, right? I mean, it's just, our worst nightmare is here. We don't believe it, okay? But because Barnabas is open and welcoming to him and moves beyond fear, Paul is able to walk around freely and to, have some fun and do the things that he wants to do. What a difference that makes when somebody's able to do that, like to be open, to be able to move beyond fear and not to be driven by those things and live a different story. So he entered into that, though, you guys, through an event earlier that we read about. The earlier event, I think, is this. So his real name was Joseph. Again, another guy that they changed his name, okay? Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, okay? Or son of consolation. So he was just a guy that you'd want to be around Barnabas. He encouraged everybody. That's just what he was known for. And so it says that he sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. So the point here isn't that, okay, you sell a field, you bring the money to the church, you're changed. That's not it. It's that he had this moment that he moved beyond like this normal life story, and he went and sold the field, and God probably spoke to him like, hey, there's needs that need to be met. I need you to sell this field and just give all the money to the church. I mean, like kind of a gnarly thing, right? To just go ahead and do that. But it's these kind of moments that actually shake us up to live a different life. Now, sometimes they're done to us, like we have no choice. And other times, there are choices that we make and we say yes to God. See, God will bring those moments, and it absolutely changes our story. And it changes other people's story too. And we become different people that are open to treating people differently in our lives. Robert McKee, who is an author, lecturer, and teaches people about story, he says that humans naturally seek comfort and stability without an inciting incident. So that's the key thing, an inciting incident. So something that changes out of the ordinary, that disrupts their comfort, they won't enter into a story. They have to get fired from their job or be forced to sign up for a marathon. A ring has to be purchased. A home has to be sold. The character has to jump into the story, into the discomfort and fear. Otherwise, the story will never happen. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Like I was thinking, like talk about football players. I was thinking about Drew Brees, okay? I remember watching him for my old team, the Chargers, and he was a good quarterback, but he was kind of just floundering. And they replaced him with a younger, better, option, Phillip Rivers, and he had gotten hurt, and everybody's kind of like, oh, he's done with his career. But here's what he did. When he got let go and went, what has he done since then? He's broken all kinds of records. He's won all kinds of, he's won the Super Bowl. I mean, he's amazing. And you hear all kinds of other stories about people like that in life too, just not football players, where it's just like, they end up losing their job, or something happens to them, or this thing happens, and they enter this totally different story. They become a different person. And so you're kind of like, so you're telling me I should look for bad things to happen to me to be good? No, that's not the point, right? The point is that's going to happen. That will happen. Like stuff's going to happen that you absolutely don't like, and the timing's going to be off, and all sorts of things, and it just, like right now, like for our family, like I have a family member that has been sick, like stage 4 cancer for quite a while, and it's just kind of like walking through things and different stuff. But it's like, it's time, right? And this is somebody, that has been a part of my life since I was a teenager. And it's just like, and it's time. And I'm like, and I'm kind of wrestling with it. And it's just like, wow, this is, because you can say to yourself, this is going to happen. But then it's happening, and you kind of go into all it accosts you, right? And it makes you change who you are. Absolutely changes who you are. And that's something that I know. And then there's stuff that doesn't, you don't know about that comes in. But these inciting incidents that come into our lives, they position us into a place where we really grow. That's the times that we grow, is when we have inciting incidents. We do grow in the mundane, in the regular life, but then there's these times where it's like normal life is kind of plateau. We're making progress. It doesn't feel like it. But then all of a sudden we jump up. And sometimes it's bad incidents, and sometimes it's good, but we just jump up. So, with Barnabas, right? Like, you could say, well, Cody, look, I know you said not to make it just religious or just, but the Holy Spirit probably spoke to Barnabas about selling this field, and so he did it. It's that simple. But what I've experienced and what I look at when I read Scripture is this, is that there's the things that happen to us inciting incidences, but then there's also what God does. Because we pray, God, change me. God, transform me. God, make me into the person I've always wanted to be. God, would you give me this thing in my life? Would you help me with this thing? Would you make me stronger? Right? And then what he does is he asks us to say yes to him. And he brings these things into our lives. And when he asks us to obey him and he shows us things that are just like crazy, like Barnabas did what people have done for thousands of years, is the Church of Jesus Christ, which is this odd thing of just like denying yourself. Like, I'm going to do something that goes against like just feeding me. Like, I'm the world's biggest vacuum. I just take in and take in and take in and take in. But there's this odd thing that Christians do, which is just they deny themselves because they follow one that totally denied himself and just gave absolutely everything. And so as Barnabas does that, what he ended up doing is he got into a place that he could actually deal with people differently and be open to seeing things as God sees them. And so what the Holy Spirit does is he speaks into us in our lives to give up things, to sacrifice things, to serve others instead of ourselves. And what happens is that it's not just about those events or moments. That's not what it's about. It's about that what he does then is he tunes us and calibrates us so that that's where we camp out and live. It's not about like just, okay, at those moments I can do that. I camp out there. And it affects our communication and our relationships and everything. Because the person that can deny themselves because God asked them to say yes to him in something can love and serve other people and can put their own stuff aside to be able to see people who God made them to be. And that's what happens here. And so here's something important, is that some of us, like we've said yes to Jesus, like, hey, I give you my life, following after you, I'm a Christian, I'm saved, I'm in, right? But I don't know that some of us have seen what our faith in Jesus can do, right? It's kind of like you have a Ferrari and you've known first gear, right? And it's like you've kind of figured that, well, as a Christian, I go to church and I do the thing, I sing some songs, and then I go do this and I ask God for help, and that's what it's about. That's part of it. But your faith in Jesus Christ is a Ferrari. The top of any type of item or thing that you can put in there, that's your faith in Jesus Christ. And the way that you find out what your faith can do is by sacrifice and saying yes to God in things that don't matter. Now listen, I don't know why it's that way, but it is that way. And so that's actually how you change and grow and become the person that God made you to be. And so many times it's not just this thing of like, well, it's going to go easy. And yeah, stuff will still happen in your life as a Christian. It's not this perfect life. But I will tell you, there's this whole other odd thing where like you choose harder stuff. You choose, like there's the law of like first need. There's this guy, Rees Howells. If you love to pray for people and partner with God in changing like real history and time and space, Rees Howells, intercessor. He's a guy that lived during like World War II, and he shares how God showed him how to pray. And it's documented how they really, when they prayed at certain times, the war changed tides and things moved. But he had this law of first need. And it's something that I've applied to my life. And is that this one time he went to the train station, he had to go help this person, pray for this person. It was a very important thing. But this person that was in front of him needed the money. They didn't have the money to do something important as well. And so, literally in line, and he had the money. He didn't have any other money. And so this person in front of him needs the money, and so he gives the money to the other person. Why? That's the first need. He's not up in the line to pay for the ticket yet. And by the time he gets up there, somebody he knows comes up and says, oh, well, hey, God told me to come down here and give you this amount, right? And gives it to him. And so that's the kind of saying yes to God, right? And here's what's important is that you will do things and you're like, well, I guess that wasn't God. But was it? Because when God asks you to say yes, he doesn't ask you to be successful. He asks you to be faithful. Like, will you do this? And as you say yes to small things, you'll tune your ears to bigger things. Because quite honestly, Barnabas saying yes to sell his field was not as big a deal as welcoming Paul into fellowship with the disciples. I mean, Paul wrote the majority of the New Testament, and he brought thousands upon thousands of people to know Jesus Christ and disciple them and laid the foundation for what we know as the Christian church. I mean, so selling his field was like getting to know God's voice and then learning that, and then later on to be able to welcome this person in that was supposed to be a murderer and all these things, but God tuned his heart towards that in that moment. So as far as our faith, when we say yes to God, we put it into another gear. Like we see what our faith can do. But it does come through odd things. Jesus put it this way in Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. It says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. Notice something, that both people here, the same thing happens to them. The only difference is like what they built things on. That's the only difference. And the point is like those incidences are going to come, the rain, the streams rising, the winds blowing, like the stuff coming against the house are going to come. But the difference is what I build it upon. And the way we build it is by saying yes, is saying yes to God. And it starts out very simple. I found, as I've been following after Jesus, since a teenager, it starts out very simple. We'll love this person or do this thing or be with me or hey, instead of doing that, do this and very simple. But then it gets more and more. And so people, Jesus loves you. You get everything with Jesus. But here's the deal. He wants everything in return. And so I'm going to say yes. Say yes to God. I mean, we the reason we live in Kansas City is because we said yes to God. Right? And the reason that we were in San Diego before that, and Central California, and in Colorado, these places, because we said yes to God. I had to decide, like we were in Southern California, that's where we're from, but we were doing some things and had stopped pastoring a church. We were waiting. We felt like God was like, hey, look, I want you to just rest for a bit. We rested for about 5 months, and it was just kind of like nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, we're just like, we felt like something's coming. I'm praying to the Lord, and he's like, and I've shared with you guys before, I'm just like, hey, look, God, we'll do what you want us to do, go where you want us to go, but you got to tell me, because you're not telling me. He says, so you moved to Kansas? And I didn't think he could pull it off, right? Because I didn't know anybody in Kansas, right? So I'm like, and then the next, like that week or whatever, the leaders at this church put something on Vineyard's website, and I looked, I'm like, oh no, man, okay, right? And one person I told that we're, from, they said, well, you know what they say, if you do that, you're either running from the law or the Lord called you, and so, but it's just as an example, I'm not saying that to say, hey, look at me, right? No, it's what you do. Like it's how you put your faith into another gear and see what it can do. Is that, see, I had to decide, like, my life isn't about living in Southern California. Like, how just lame would that be? Or for somebody to say equally, my life is about living in Kansas City, or my life is just about this. Like, that just sums it up. Just how shallow is that? As a follower of Jesus, it's like, no, my life is defined in relationship with Jesus Christ. And if he asks me, I say yes, right? And yes, there is getting to know his voice and walking through those things and in all sorts of ways that you go through it. So this is the process, right? So here's some communications tools, okay? Because you position yourself, you say yes to the Lord, then there's just some real practical things, okay? And these are the things you're able to do, I think, as you get to know God, and then he works in you. So number one is this, is that know your own story, okay? So your own story gets brought into every relationship that you have, okay? So Donald Miller, in that book I mentioned, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, it says a story is based on what people think is important. So when we live a story, we are telling people around us what we think is important. Also, too, in the book Crucial Conversations, in the training for that, it says this, our stories create our emotions, we create our stories. Okay, think about that. Is that we're living this life, and I'm a part of this bigger thing, but then when I interact with people and things happen, then that story gets smaller, like it's a smaller microcosm of the bigger story. But it makes all the difference in the world what story you're a part of, right? Because quite honestly, like knowing that God's going to take care of you, knowing that God says, hey, don't worry about what you're going to wear, what you're going to do, what you're going to eat. I've got it. I'm taking care of you. I'll protect you, right? It doesn't matter that God says, I'll protect you. Nothing will come harm to you, unless the reality is unless he allows it, right? So, but he says, like, you're mine. Like, I've bought you with a price. You're mine. I protect you. I'll never leave you or forsake you. That means nothing knowing that unless you put it to test, right? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die, right? It's like, unless you really put it to a test, that means nothing. Because it's one thing to say that I live my life by faith, it's another thing to do it. And so when you do that, you tune yourself to be able to deal with people differently. Because you're a part of this bigger story. Like, yeah, God really has my life. Like, the person that's following after Jesus becomes more and more less defensive, right? Like, I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to fight for God does that. And I don't have to walk around with clenched fists. I can live differently. So the process is this. It's not up on the screen here, but this is typically what happens in smaller stories, right? We're talking about the bigger story, but here's a smaller story. This is a tool, okay, to know your story and how it affects relationships. What happens is, as things happen, I see and hear things, okay? I see and hear things, then I tell a story. And the bigger story that I'm a part of absolutely influences how I tell those stories to myself on a daily basis. Then I feel, and then I act, okay? Here's a scenario. You're working on a report. Your manager at work checks up on you 3 times in 1 hour, offering suggestions. Okay? So you see and hear. Now, what story do you tell yourself? Well, you decide that your manager is questioning your capabilities. It's got to be, right? They don't believe you can complete the task on your own. They think you're incompetent. Anybody ever done this? Okay. Third, you generate a feeling, right? The feeling is hurt and defensive, leads to anger, Your manager obviously hasn't paid attention to the other reports you've turned in to spec in the past, right? This whole thing going on, okay? Fourth, you act. So you hold a grudge, you don't listen or respond to your manager's suggestions, right? There's this process that happens because we tell that story. Now, James in the New Testament speaks of a similar process that our minds work through is when it comes to sin, okay? But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. See and hear, tell a story, okay? Then, after desire has conceived, right? I'm going to fully feel it. Like the story is taking over. It gives birth to sin, right? And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. And so the way that our minds work is we walk through this process and we tell ourselves stories and then we walk those stories out. And our stories are things that are planted in our minds, right? So I act upon, I grab reference points. For when certain things happen, I grab reference points for those. And it's things that I consume. Like if I'm consuming, what I'm consuming is going to influence what I say. It's also things like my self-talk, like what I say to myself. And then also it's the things that other people say to me. And what's important is that we realize that with the things that we consume, media or the things that we read, or our self-talk or the things that people say to us, there's affirmations and then there's saboteur type stuff, okay? Affirmations is the stuff that builds us up. Now, I'm not talking about like, you are the greatest unicorn snowflower that just, or snowflake, right? I'm not talking about that stuff, right? Like, that's away from reality, right? You've got to be a real person. You have flaws and everything else. But I'm talking about like stuff that really is true, right? That's why the New Testament, we've talked about it some during this series, but it's important to come back to it. The New Testament says all this amazing stuff about you. Like you're the light of the world and you don't sin anymore and that you're seated in heavenly places with Christ. And you look at yourself, seated with Christ, man, I can't even clean my car. I've got like 7-Eleven cups, Slurpees from 4 years ago. What are you talking about, right? But the point, like that's an affirmation. The New Testament, your spirituality is based upon you believing that what it's said about you is already true. And as you believe what's already said about you is already true, you become that. Because it's the reality that Jesus has made for us. So there's affirmations like with self-talk, right? And then there's also saboteur stuff. Like at some point in all of our lives, typically right around adolescence or somewhere in there, we start to hear things from other people. We feel self-aware. We feel like insecure. We feel like we don't have it all, that kind of situation. And then what we do is we start to live out of that, right? Like I've shared mine with you. Like I've realized that my saboteur is this, because it's not beating up or that sort of thing, because it's very tricky. It's not about beating me up or you're not this, whatever. It's you don't work hard enough. That's mine. Like I am so driven, and it's me driving myself. It's not God. It's not you guys. It's not the church board. It's just like I'm just like, yes, get there yesterday, right? And so I have to manage that. But that's my saboteur, like my self-talk. There's some other stuff as far as other people, like, right? Like things that my football coach said or parents or that sort of thing, that it's like, hey, you know what? Actually, there's something else going on here that I'm going to live. So the next tool is know the other person, right? You've got to know how you're processing things and what's going on in that conversation or those moments, what story you're telling. But then there's the story that the other person is telling themselves, right? Like, what's going on with them? And I brought up last week that if we don't do this, we don't honor people, which is so important. Why? Look at Psalm 139. David writes this, but know that this can be said about every person, that every person that walks the earth is the crown jewel of God's creation. Just every person absolutely is. And you can say, well, gosh, they sure don't act like it, or they sure don't look like it, or whatever, right? But remember, the vision, the image is marred, right? In all of us. The image that God put upon us is marred, and it's like a glass that's dirty, and Jesus comes and he wipes it, and sooner you can see the resemblance of the family. But this is what David wrote. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Like the idea here is like is poema, like a poem. Like God's making a poem. Like all of us are this poem. Like all of us are this beautiful thing that communicates himself to other people. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. So Psalm 139. So know that every person that you come across, that is true of them. That God made them together as this wonderful thing to be expressed, no matter their current state. And so you see the correlation, how important it is that you say yes to God, because as you say yes to God, because you're not going to get there just by like saying like, okay, this person is the crown jewel of God's creation. I got it. You know, give it about 3 seconds, right? I mean, it just absolutely, it's hard. But if you're saying yes to God, you get his heart, you're calibrated. Donald Miller says this in his book. He says, when you stop expecting people to be perfect, you can like them for who they are. Yeah. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Here's the truth that I've realized is that when I get so annoyed with people that, like, I'm just like, they have to change. Like, I can't stand that thing that they do, or I can't stand that person or whatever. Guess who needs to change? Me. I need to change. Like, I'm going to be transparent here. So last night, right? Last night, I'm sitting at our dining room table, and I'm finishing up some things, that I need to do for today and stuff. So I'm super focused, but it's right about dinner time. And so a few members of the family sit down. First starts with one, and there's tortilla chips involved. And one thing that like bothers me is like loud, like, right? Anybody else? You my people? Okay, yeah. So, but here's the thing though, is I'm sitting there and then another one sits down. And then another one sits down and it's just like, I'm like sitting there, it's this symphony of, and then here's the problem, is that I kind of gave them a look and they realized that it was bothering me, so what did they do? They ramped it up, right? Turn up the volume, right? So, but here's the thing though, you guys, like I sat there in this moment and I'm saying to myself, like, so I, like any good-natured person, I put on my headphones and right? But why? Because I'm the problem, right? I'm the problem with that situation. Because here's the thing. The Lord reminded me, he's like, Cody, you remember when you were in your early 20s and, you served me as a youth pastor and you're just walking the streets of Carlsbad and crying out to me and just, because all my friends were married young. And so I was just like the single guy living by myself. And I'm just like, Lord, would you bless me? Like, would you bless me with a wife? Would you bless me like with this? And would you bless me with children? Like, this is my desire. This is who you've made me to be. And just like crying out. And the Lord's like, hey, you asked for this, right? Like you pray, like, but no, there was a time where I was sitting there just, hearing the sound of my own tortilla chip eating, right? How empty is that? Because that's what he had, right? So I'm the one that needs to change. Like if I get that annoyed, that thing going on, I'm the one that needs to make an adjustment. That's just absolutely the truth. Here's something else that's important, is that people do things that make sense to them, okay? We have choices. We can either say this person's messed up, or we can say they're a black-hearted person, dark-hearted person, just a mean person, or we can realize that people do things that make sense to them. Just people that makes sense to them. That they're not trying to sabotage your life. They're not trying to go after you or get you. That's just, they're communicating and doing things that make sense to them because of their story. Here's a prayer that is one of the most powerful God-hearing, answering prayers that you can ever pray, which is, Father, give me your heart for John. God, give me your heart for Steve. God, give me your heart for Sally. Help me to see them as you see them. Radical. God answers prayer. Not all prayers equally. He answers that one like fire. Because if you pray that and see that, God will do that in your heart and your mind. So a key thing right? That's all kind of big picture, but let me help you with something like real practical. A key thing is this, is people's communication style is like why they do what they do. It's important to know. And there's two main communication styles that people have. There's an aesthetic and a pragmatic, okay? So this is what they lead with. And so when you're interacting with a person and saying things to a person, you're dealing with these things. So like an aesthetic person is all about feel, okay? So the aesthetic person, like if you say something to them, they'll hear the ouch first. So it's important how you say things to an aesthetic person. It's all about context. So how something is said, not just the words used, okay? They don't take it at face value, like what else is going on. An aesthetic person in your family always knows when something's wrong with somebody else in the family. And then you ever notice like somebody else is just kind of like cruising along and this person's over here weeping in tears or whatever. It's like, you don't see what's going on here? It's like, no. But that would be the more pragmatic person that isn't sitting there like looking over everything. When you're speaking to an aesthetic person, use nurturing words, right? So if you have somebody in your life or somebody you work with or any of those things, and you're realizing that like you'll say things like, and you're like, what? I just said, what's going on with you? Right? just asking, okay? And they're just like, I can't believe you said that. What are you doing? You're coming after me. Isn't this going right? That's an aesthetic person. They're really not like trying to ruin your day. What that person is doing is that they heard the way you said it in some way, and they're mirroring it back to you. So with that person, it's important to give nurturing words. Also, too, if an aesthetic person hears the ouch first, so if you have that type of person, here's how you help them, because they're getting hijacked, right? Especially if you didn't mean to say it that way. Ask them questions. Well, I'm sorry. What did you hear me say? Right? Ask them questions. It helps to bring them out of that point. Okay. Now, a pragmatic person is all about bottom line. Okay. So pragmatic people are straight shooters. Like what you see is what you get. Right. Pragmatic person knows how they did a good job. Is did they get the job done? Right. It's not so much, well, the person was happy, whatever. It's like, job got done, good job. Okay. A pragmatic person, like if you have a pragmatic boss, and you go in, they want to know what's happening with a certain thing or report or class or a certain thing, and you go in and say, oh, it was amazing, everybody just felt so good, everybody was happy, everybody was hugging, there's like, oh, kill me now, right? You're just like, well, here's the result that happened. It brought up income by 30%, and we have more buy-in here. These people said that they would come in on these days to accomplish this, and it's good. And then it's like, then you can tell them, hey, and it's really, they're feeling that, right? They want to know that. So they want bottom line. So somebody that's pragmatic is like that. So you share facts, strategy with those things, okay? So here's a couple of things to take with us to change today, okay? First is decide to say yes to the Holy Spirit. Because remember, that's the entry point, right? You can apply the principles that we talked about today, and you can make progress in these areas of your life. But you cannot live in the context of being able to like camp out and live and grow unless you're saying yes to God, right? And remember, he's not going to call you to always things that feel nice and fluffy, but he's going to call you for you to lay things down. He's going to call you to things that don't make sense as far as this life. Because when you said yes to God, like with the big yes, or if you're pondering, what would it be like if I said the big yes to God? Like, I give you my life, I surrender my life to you, I trust in you, right? Then what you do is you enter like this whole other way to live. Like it really is a different way. It rubs against the way that we typically are taught are different things. And it's not that you can't be successful. It's not that you can't, have a great business or a great career. But he is in charge of your life. And you listen to him. You obey him. And so some of the thinkings that you have when you bring into that relationship with Christ, you surrender those and say, hey, I don't really agree with that. Like some people think like, well, if you're a Christian, you have to agree with everything. No, you don't. But you still obey, right? That's the kind of stuff that we get as parents when we say, well, why? Because I'm your dad. I don't totally know, and your argument totally makes sense, and it really goes, but I'm saying it's that, right? Those are more of the conversations I have now, but here's the deal. God has best for us, and so you do those. So decide to say yes to the Holy Spirit. And then let the story that you're living in and becoming a part of more and more as you say yes to God, let that influence all the other stories that happen during the day. Like, here's an action step for this week. When you notice and somebody does something and like your shoulders start to tighten up and you're kind of like, right, and you see and hear, and then you walk through that process and you're starting to tell a story, and it's kind of like that story, like, oh, they think that, right? I dare you to just say, actually, you know what? I'm part of God's story. I'm his child. He loves me. And I don't need to be defensive. I don't need to like clench fists and go after this person. So I'm going to take the time to understand what's really going on, right? And then if you find out that that's really what's going on, then you can deal with it the other way, right? You can walk through it and go with that. Or it's just like, oh, that's not actually how it is. So take that story that you're a part of and walk it into those things and move through it. I mean, I'm trying, as we walk through this, I'm trying to make it like as much as possible practical, but, and so hopefully you guys feel that, but just know that when you invite Christ into all of your relationships, and the other person may not be a believer, they may not, like, I don't even believe in God, but when you invite God into those relationships, into those things, it transforms companies, it transforms departments, it transforms churches, it transforms all kinds of stuff when you just invite God in. And even if you're the only one doing it. But it's just saying like, God, you know what? I don't want to just go around the normal way. I'm going to do this. Invite him into your marriage. Invite him to your relationships. Invite him into those things, because here's the thing. He will speak. I remember, just in closing, and we'll have Nikki and Michael come up, and we'll close in a worship song here. Remember when one of my sons was real young, and we were having some issues, like sleep issues and stuff. Like, they would wake up like every half an hour, like at night, and just kind of like come into our room, wake us up. And so it was like sleep torture. It was a bad deal. And this went on for like a year and a half, 2 years. And I was just like, sitting there driving one day, and the Lord's like, hey, and I was just thinking through things, and the Lord's just like, hey, are you giving him grace like I give to you? Like, are you really taking the time to like understand him like the way that you've understood me as a father? And I'm like, yeah, but he's really messed up. And he's like, so are you, you know? And I was like, oh yeah. You know, it's like, he's really doing this thing. He's like, so do you. You know, it's pretty similar. And so that's why we're able to take the way we're loved in that relationship with God, and then we're able to move it into our relationships in our lives. It absolutely is tangible. It absolutely is applicable to everything we do. So let's stand and let's worship together.
Thanks for listening this week. If you're looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, please visit vineyardkcwest.com.